So, we are standing at a turning point in human history. Think about it. Every revolution before this was about tools: fire, the steam engine, the wheel, electricity, the internet. But now, for the first time ever, it's not just about tools, it's about intelligence itself being replicated. Machines can think, create, and even out strategize us. It sounds exciting and terrifying at the same time. Let me ask you, will AI liberate us from routine or make us mentally dependent? Will it expand human creativity or simply replace it? Now, see, here's the thing nobody likes to admit. Most people are going to sleepwalk into the future. They let AI think for them, create for them, decide for them, and slowly will we lose that very thing that makes us human: imagination, intuition, choices, expression, and original thoughts. But there's another possibility. A smaller group of people will wake up and say, no, AI is not here to replace me. It's here to free me. It's here to free me from the noise, the drudgery, the inefficiencies, the low value tasks. And I can uh, actually now start to create, expand, and live more fully. Now, this is the fork in the road, and there are two futures: one of dependency and one of expansion. And the choice is always ours. The choice is not in some faraway timeline, it's in the decisions that we make right now, every single day. And my question today is that beyond the economics, beyond the jobs, there's a deeper question: what does this mean for the soul of humanity? Because if AI can draft a poem, paint an image, even stimulate a human voice, then what is left that is uniquely ours? Now, what is that flame within us that no machine can ever touch? That's where I want to take this conversation, not just about what AI will do or can do, but what we as human beings are meant to become in this age of AI. And I can't think of anyone better to explore this other than with none other than Dena Merriam. Dina has spent her life looking at the great arc of human consciousness through the lens of karma, through cycles of history, and spiritual wisdom. So she brings a lens that goes beyond fear, beyond hype, into deeper reality of where humanity is headed. So today we are going to ask, how does AI intersect with our past life karmas? Could it accelerate our collective evolution? Or could it magnify our shadows? What do our choices today mean for the humanity we'll be living or walking into tomorrow? Because at the end of the day, the future is not about machines, it's about us, our desires, our awareness, our responsibility, our experience in this human body, and our vision of what kind of world we want to leave behind. So let me put that forward to Dina, and I welcome you to the episode of uh, Future Time Travel. Hi, Dina, namaste, and welcome. Welcome back to the Eternal Soul podcast. I'm really
Namaste. It's
namaste.
good to be back. Now that the summer's over, it's good to be back.
Thank you, Dina. So, Dina, today I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you. Briefly, when we had met back in India, I think almost a year back now, maybe 8, 9 months back, you had briefly mentioned, you just touched upon it, that you're also exploring time travel into the future. And we didn't get to talk much about that, but it's been in my mind that, it's something that you have explored. And I'm very curious to know from you, especially today when we're standing at this intersection of AI creeping into every little, part of our lives. How is it all looking for humanity for the future? Where are we headed?
So, as you know, most of my writings have been about my past memories in different time periods and in different cultures. And I don't know, maybe uh, several years ago, I began to see my future trajectory. I began to see my next birth and the birth after that, and I try to place it into context of what was happening in the world. And of course, nothing is set in stone because everything is in flux, but there are probabilities and there are likely scenarios. And a lot depends on what we do now. But it's easier for me to see my own trajectory because I know I know myself. I know what the unfilled aspirations are. I know what my intentions are, what I couldn't do in this life that I am designing for the future, because we design our future. Um, but in terms of AI, whatever we're going to call it, machine intelligence, um, it all depends on the consciousness with which we use it. It's the same thing with nuclear energy. And it's the same thing with the internet, which was a tremendous gift. We couldn't be doing this without the internet. And yet it's got, very malevolent uses as well. And what we've seen with the internet is the spread of misinformation. And so people don't know what truth is anymore. People don't know who to believe. And that's intentional on the part of some people who couldn't have done that before the internet. When you look back, 30, 40 years, you didn't have, if a vaccine came out, for example, it was clear that the authority was the medical community. They told you about it and you proceeded.
Yeah.
Now people don't know who to believe, what to believe.
Mm.
And so that's an unfortunate misuse of the internet. And we're going to have the same thing multiplied with AI. There are going to be many benefits. Already we're seeing, um, I've been watching sort of the use in medicine. Already there've been incredible advances because of AI, because it can it can compile so much information that would take people years to do. It can do it very quickly. So there are going to be medical advances that are going to provide a benefit to a lot of people. At the same time, misinformation is probably going to become accelerated, and so people won't know what to believe, and we already see this beginning to happen. So it all comes back to consciousness. Everything comes back to consciousness, and my feeling about the future is the most important thing right now is to awaken people, is to help people access their own spiritual resources through meditation, through spiritual practices. I mean, there's so many spiritual practices that are available now that were not available 100 years ago, except to the select few who were leaving, worldly life and becoming renunciates. But now you can be the CEO of a big company and have access to these spiritual practices to work on your own spiritual evolution. And the most depressing thing right now is spiritual evolution of the human community, so that we outgrow a lot of the detrimental, dangerous habits and qualities that we have. Habits and qualities that are destroying the earth and that are leading to wars. We should outgrow war by now. We should have outgrown war by now. The fact that we're still doing unthinkable things to people, you have to say, after all this time, after all we've seen, after all we've been through, we're still doing that. There's drilling going on in this apartment, so I hope it doesn't
No, I
interfere.
cannot even hear it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So AI has to be accompanied by, and of course, the other aspect of it is that a few people are going to reap tremendous financial benefits, but other people are going to lose jobs. So that has to be addressed. And there has to be a more equitable sharing of the benefits. So the whole economic system is going to need readjusting. But we're heading in that direction anyhow, because economic inequality has reached such a point that it's gonna explode. I mean, will reach a point where something has to change, and I think we're already reaching that point. And AI will hasten it, because you can have a few people controlling these systems, and the people who are losing jobs will have to be reoriented to new jobs. People need jobs. So how that's going to happen, there's going to be dislocation, but a wise guidance through this will lead us to a better place.
Okay, perhaps like 2008 when the financial crisis happened. I mean, I was literally at the epicenter of all of that Lehman Brothers fallout and all of that collapse. So, I mean, at that time it looked very grim because if the financial structure of the whole world kind of crumbles like that, what will happen? But yes, I mean, obviously everything kind of resurrected in a better way, actually, in a lot of ways. So,
This
but this is, yeah, sorry.
the system that we have leads to such cycles where there's a crash, and then regulation comes in, and there's a readjustment, and then 15 years go by, the regulations get loosened until we can address this issue of greed. And I talk a lot about that in my new book, Sita's Yoga. Because at that time it was Ravana who was exemplified this excessive greed, and which was unknown in Treta Yuga society. People lived very harmoniously with the earth. People didn't have, excessive amounts. Excuse me. And he was inserting that into the collective. So we've reached that point again where we have not one a personification of greed, we have several. And that will need to be addressed. So greed is the source of a lot of suffering. They say that without greed, there'd be no scarcity. Greed creates
Great.
scarcity.
Okay.
And so, how do we counter that? There's a whole chapter in this book called the Yoga of Generosity, and it's how to counter greed is through generosity. All the negatives can be countered by cultivating the opposite quality, and we all have to do that within ourselves because we're adding to the collective. So the more we can counter greed individually, the more we can see it diminish in our society over time. I mean, it's not going to happen in a day or a year,
Right.
but not to value. I mean, our society places value on excessive wealth. Why? I mean, is that a way to happiness? We know that it's not a way to happiness. So why do we place value on that?
It just sets a score, like, I don't know. I mean, we've got to have some goalpost to get to, right? And that just becomes like a benchmark where you can measure success.
Well, I mean, success is really contribution to the well-being of the whole. That's a successful life when you really add value to people's lives and contribute to the well-being of society. And I think that we're going to shift toward that over time because we are entering a new era. We've entered a new era, but there's still a transition in terms of a lot of mindsets of the old era, an old era that was characterized by not seeing the spiritual reality, only seeing the material and only valuing the material because there was nothing beyond. And that is beginning to, I think, be challenged in many levels.
Beautiful. Yes. And you just briefly at the beginning mentioned that we design our futures. How does
Totally.
that work? Yeah, how does that work? And how can one design brilliant and best futures for themselves?
Well, I mean, first you have to acknowledge that our current life we created. There's no judge sitting anywhere in the universe that's determining our journey. We determine it often unconsciously by our past deeds and desires and aspirations and patterns. Who we've been in the past creates who we are now. In that same way, who we are now is creating who we're going to be in the future. So most of us do this unconsciously without but thinking. But if you, for example, if you have a quality that's creating problems for yourselves, pride or whatever, and if you don't deal with it now, it's going to come back again in the future, and you'll have to deal with it then. So who we are now is a direct result of the past and is a direct cause of the future. So we can do it consciously. We can consciously, the more we live consciously, this whole mindfulness movement of living mindfully, that can be deepened. So it's not just being mindful of your speech, being mindful of your thoughts, being mindful of your patterns, of your reactions. If you have a difficult relationship with somebody, it's there for a purpose. So rather than just ignoring it and just not dealing with it, deal with it now, and then you will resolve it here and now, and it's done. You don't have to deal with it again in the future. So if you spend time, and I think we see this more in the latter part of life, because in the early part of life, you're fulfilling desires, aspirations, relationships that have been set in the past. And then you come to a point where a lot of that has been done, and the patterns that you're setting will guide the future. So one can do that as consciously as one can. Of course, the further along you are in your spiritual awakening, the more you can do that consciously of who you want to be. And that's a question worth asking. Who do you want to be?
Yes, Tina, but then, earlier in life, we are unconscious, and yes, there is a pursuit and things, there's a whole different energy and vibe. But by the latter half, like the patterns are so set by then that even if there can be awareness of the fact that, okay, this is my pattern, like a certain way of thinking or a certain way of self-talk and all of those things, but then it's so deeply ingrained by the time, you're at that level of maturity that is so difficult even with awareness to kind of wire all of that stuff. How does one?
Well, meditation rewires the brain. Certain practices, mantra, other practices, rewire the brain. But one needs consistent, regular, and deepening practice to rewire the brain. In other words, to get rid of those patterns. Which patterns are useful to us, which habits are useful, and which habits are impeding us. And that's why meditation is half the battle, and self-reflection is the other half. Really looking at yourself, seeing, are you happy with the way you are? Are you satisfied with who you are in this moment, the way you are with other people? And I think knowing, for example, if you don't have a happy relationship, right? If you have a struggling relationship, and yet you have an aspiration for that, and it doesn't come to you in this life, well, it might come to you in the next life. If that's your aspiration that's unfulfilled, you might achieve that in the next life. And so looking at your unfulfilled desires and which ones are worthy to take with you.
Okay. So, I mean, they may come in the next life, they may come even in this life, or they may come in, I don't know how much further ahead. But the point you're making is that if we take charge of today and do a lot of introspection around who we are, and that's the only thing we can control, right?
That's
Because
right. Yeah, who we are.
hmm,
And there may be things that you can resolve in this life that you have been ignoring. A troubled relationship. A lot of people struggle with work issues, finding the right work for themselves.
yes.
That's very challenging in today's world. In today's world. So that to me, what are your talents? What are your desires? What are your aspirations? and doing your best to pursue that. But I know that that's especially in, sort of early adult life. A lot of people struggle because we don't receive a lot of guidance, and there's so many choices, and there's such a competitive field in the world today, and society is in the midst of a lot of changes. So the way it is today is not going to be the way it is in 10 years. And so how do you cope with that if you're coming into the work world and knowing that things are changing rapidly? Meditation gives you the inner guidance. One needs to develop the intuitive sense of where you can fit in, where you can contribute. And so there's nothing that meditation can't help you with, because it helps you tap your inner resources, your deeper self. And that's where the guidance comes from.
I have a personal challenge there right now, Tina. I mean, I have been in a situation in the past where I could sit and meditate, like do whatever, but I could sit for hours and be very content with that situation. But now the level of uncertainty is so high that my attention span or my level of being able to sit with my eyes closed and shut it down is just like contracting. I mean, that could be just me personally and my situation. But but I feel like, I don't know if there is a shift like that, that it's all the answers are available at just a press of a few buttons.
A lot of people are experiencing in that now, because the collective energy right now is very volatile. There's a lot of uncertainty because we have volatile leaders, and so
Yeah.
they're inserting this uncertainty, and we're all picking up on that. So how do you, and that's one of the challenges right now, how do you protect yourself against that? Uh, that's a challenge, but we have to meet that challenge. One has to just keep working on it, not to give up. That's the main thing. If you can only sit for 30 minutes that day or 40 minutes that day, you do the best you can. Not to chastise yourself, but to know that you're responding to energies that are circulating on the planet right now. A lot of volatility, and it will settle down at some point. We don't know when, but it will settle down. But we have to go through certain changes. There's a purpose to this. The Sita book I write, there was a purpose to Ravana and a purpose to his defeat. So everything has a purpose, and trying to see into the deeper meaning of what this is, how you can benefit. Okay, so one thing is you have to learn to protect yourself from the energies that are circulating in the ethers, from all um, and I'm struggling with that too. Read much too much of the news. I shouldn't be looking at as much as I do, because this constant uh, uh, bringing your energy down, uh, and yet you want to be attentive to what's going on. You don't want to just shut it out, so you're not. So that's a real balance of how to be present and to witness what's going on and not to be affected by it. That's the challenge that I see a lot of people are dealing with right now.
And one last question, okay, Tina, because I'm mindful of the time as well. Uh, this climate change is happening like all over. At least in India, we're seeing floods all around and rains just unstoppable at the moment. Uh, and rest of the world as well. I don't tap too much into the world news as well, but this is happening now. What people have been talking about for a long time. How is this going to play
So
out?
climate change is here. It's not a future. It's here. And you know, the fact that so many people are refusing to acknowledge it, it's just it's hard to explain that. It's just hard to explain that. And so, how are we to deal with that? I think, just like I said, uh, the way to counter greed is generosity. The way to counter fear is deeper trust. The way to counter all the negatives happening to the environment is deeper love for the natural world. So we each have to do our part. The more of us who really become attentive, mindful of how much energy we're giving to nature, of that adds to that collective that is in the process of renewing our relationship with nature, which is nature's been horribly abused. And that's part of the whole greed thing, horribly abused. And of course, there's going to be a reaction. I mean, nature is sentient. There's going to be a reaction. How much abuse can the earth take? And it's meant to awaken us. So the more we could be part of that awakening and consciously give love to the natural world, whatever we're surrounded with. I mean, I have a huge ancient tree in my yard at home that I every day spend time in relationship with. I love that tree. And the tree must be a few hundred years old. It's huge. And I've become more attentive to those kinds of things. And I think that's what the individual can do because, what can the individual do? Well, there are things we can do, recycling and all that. You try to get, whatever we can do on that level. But to me, the essence is coming again into a loving relationship with the natural world. Then we're countering the disregard that's taking place, so much of the disregard, hostility that's taking place, the indifference. And the way I see it is there will be earth changes. And I've read that in every shift from one yuga to another, there are earth changes. But that over the decades, the meditating or spiritual community will be large enough and deep enough to avoid the worst possibilities. So that's why I say it all comes back to consciousness, which addresses everything. The more we can work on our consciousness, the more we can help avoid the worst of the possibilities.
So the challenge right now is that as much as it feels counterintuitive to just shut your eyes and go into meditation, that's the very thing that's needed the most right now. Yeah.
And in meditation, sending out love vibrations and I mean, we meditate. When meditation first became popular in the West when I was younger, the thought was you're meditating for yourself, to help yourself, to deal with life's problems, to understand life. But over time, I've come to see you're meditating for the collective because every meditation changes the frequency. We are all part of this collective. And what the way our consciousness is affects the whole. So we are meditating not just for ourselves, we are meditating for the collective. And so that puts a different angle on, a different sense of responsibility of how we can best serve the world through our spiritual efforts. I always talk about meditation. For others, it might be prayer, it might be mantra, any kind of, I really mean any kind of spiritual practice. For me, it takes the form of meditation. But that's how you participate in this transformation of the collective.
Brilliant. Is there anything else for this episode, Dena, that you'd like to say?
Well, I think it's a continuing conversation.
Yes.
Because as we see AI advance, I mean, we do have to watch closely. And as we see that there's just going to be a handful of people who are going to be reaping financial benefits, and we look at how the economic system seems to be crying out for an adjustment. Our energies are going to be important in that process. We can't withdraw. I mean, the purpose of bringing spiritual practice to all of us and not reserving it for the ascetics or the hermits is because we all now have to participate in this transformation. And everyone's role is important. And so I'll leave people with that to reflect on that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dena. Thanks for your guiding light. Namaste.
See you next time.
Thank you, Dena. See you then.